Oops, my hand slipped.
The coffee hit her face before she even saw it coming. Nia Johnson stood frozen for half a second as the scalding liquid soaked into the collar of her cream-colored dress, dripping down her collarbone in a slow, deliberate line. The hotel lobby fell silent. Somewhere near the front desk, a bellhop stopped mid-step, tray in hand, mouth slightly open. Two executives near the elevator bank turned to look. And there, standing 3 feet away with an empty cup still tilted in her manicured hand, was Vanessa Bennett, smiling like she had just done something clever. "Oops," Vanessa said, not sounding sorry at all. "My hand slipped." Marcus Bennett stood beside his new wife, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with the kind of amusement a man wears when he believes nothing can ever touch him again. He looked at Nia, at the coffee running down her dress, at the small wet patch forming on the marble floor beneath her heels. And he laughed. Not a loud laugh, a quiet, superior one, the kind reserved for people who think they have already won. "Some people," Marcus said loud enough for the lobby to hear, "never move up in life." Nia didn't flinch. She reached into her handbag, pulled out a folded napkin, and dabbed at her collar without a word. Her face stayed calm, almost bored, as if this was an inconvenience rather than an insult. She looked at Marcus for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for him to notice how steady her eyes were. And then she turned and walked toward the elevators without saying a single word back. Vanessa laughed loudly, tossing her hair. "Did you see her face? She didn't even say anything. Guess some people know their place." Marcus checked his watch. 7 minutes until the meeting that would change his life. 7 minutes until the billion-dollar investment that would save his company from collapse. He straightened his jacket, took Vanessa's hand, and walked toward the private elevator that would take them to the top-floor conference suite, feeling, for the first time in months, like a man in control of his destiny. He had no idea that in less than 30 minutes, he would watch his entire empire disintegrate in front of his own eyes. And it would happen because of the very woman he had just humiliated in a hotel lobby over a spilled cup of coffee. 10 years earlier, before the tailored suits and the private jets, Marcus Bennett had been a 26-year-old software engineer, sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a 1-bedroom apartment in Atlanta, trying to convince investors that his idea for a logistics platform was worth funding. Nobody believed in him. Banks rejected his loan applications. Friends stopped returning his calls. The only person who never stopped believing was Nia. She worked 2 jobs back then, one at a call center during the day and another waiting tables 3 nights a week, just so there would be enough money for rent and enough left over for Marcus to keep building his company without worrying about bills. She proofread his pitch decks at midnight. She sat beside him rehearsing investor questions until 2 a.m. When his first prototype crashed during a demo and an investor laughed him out of the room, it was Nia who sat with him in the car afterward, telling him quietly that this was not the end, that people who build real things always get laughed at before they get respected. For 3 years, she believed in him when no one else did. And then, slowly, things began to change. The company found its first big client, then a second. Then a modest round of funding turned into a much larger one. And suddenly Marcus was being invited to conferences, appearing on panels, shaking hands with men in expensive suits who wanted a piece of what he was building. With each new milestone, something in him shifted. He started noticing things about Nia that had never bothered him before. The way she said certain words, the neighborhood she grew up in, the fact that she didn't know which fork to use at a formal dinner the first time they were invited to one. He never said any of this to her directly, not at first. Instead, he stopped inviting her to certain events, telling her they would be boring or not her scene. He started scheduling dinners with investors and quietly leaving her name off the invitation. And in the office, he began spending long hours with his new executive assistant, a polished, ambitious woman named Vanessa, who understood how to talk to boardrooms in a language Nia had never been taught. Nia noticed. Of course she noticed. But when she asked Marcus about the late nights, about the sudden distance, he told her she was imagining things, that she was insecure, that success was making her paranoid. He made her feel like the problem was her, not the fact that a wedding ring apparently did not stop a man from noticing another woman's ambition. The affair went on for nearly a year before Nia found the messages. When she confronted him, Marcus did not apologize. He did not even pretend to feel guilty. He simply told her, with a coldness she had never heard from him before, that he had outgrown the marriage, that the company was worth hundreds of millions now, that his life had changed, and that maybe hers should have changed with it, except she never really tried. "You'll never be anything without me," he told her the day she signed the divorce papers, his voice flat, almost bored, like he was reading her a weather forecast rather than ending a decade of her life. Nia said nothing back. She signed the papers, packed 2 suitcases, and left the house they had bought together, the house she had helped pay the mortgage on during the years he had nothing. She did not take alimony. She did not ask for a settlement. She simply walked away. 6 months later, she was gone from the country entirely. Seoul was not a city Nia had ever imagined living in. She had accepted an international business fellowship almost on impulse, mostly because she needed distance, needed an ocean between herself and every memory Marcus had left behind. She spoke no Korean when she arrived. She knew no one. She rented a small apartment above a bakery and spent her first few months translating documents for a nonprofit cultural foundation, rebuilding her confidence one small task at a time. It was at a charity gala hosted by the foundation that she first met Kang Min-jae. He was quiet in a room full of loud people, standing near the back with a glass of water instead of champagne, listening more than he spoke. When Nia accidentally knocked over a stack of programs near the registration table, he was the one who knelt down to help her gather them, apologizing for being in her way, even though it had been her mistake, not his. She had no idea who he was. She assumed he was another staff member, maybe a translator like her, someone hired for the evening. He never corrected her assumption. For weeks afterward, whenever their paths crossed at cultural events, he simply introduced himself as Min-jae, nothing more. He asked about her work, her family, her life before Korea, and he listened the way very few people ever had, without interrupting, without steering the conversation back toward himself. It was nearly 2 months before she learned the truth from a foundation coordinator, who nearly choked on her tea when Nia casually mentioned that Min-jae had walked her home the night before. "You know that's Chairman Kang, right?" the coordinator asked. "Kang Group. He controls half the shipping contracts in this country. People don't just walk him home." Nia was stunned. She confronted him about it the next time they met, half expecting him to laugh at her, to explain that of course she should have known, that a man like him didn't waste time on someone like her by accident. Instead, Min-jae looked almost embarrassed. "I didn't tell you because I wanted you to know me before you knew what I have," he said. "Most people only see the second thing." There were rumors about Kang Min-jae that went beyond business circles, quiet whispers about the older, less visible parts of his family's influence, the kind of power that didn't show up on annual reports. Nia heard the rumors eventually. She asked him directly once, late one evening, whether they were true. He did not deny them. He also did not elaborate. "I protect what is mine," he told her simply, "and I would never let harm come to something I value." It was not the kind of answer that should have comforted her. And yet, somehow, it did. Because in every moment she had known him, he had never once made her feel small. He remembered details about her life she had mentioned only in passing. He never rushed her. He never made her feel like she needed to prove she belonged in a room. For the first time in years, Nia felt like herself again, not a shadow standing beside someone else's. Ambition. They married quietly, 18 months later, in a small ceremony attended by fewer than 20 people. No press, no announcements. Kang Min-jae's world did not operate in headlines, and Nia had learned to prefer it that way. Back in America, Marcus Bennett's empire was quietly falling apart. The logistics platform that had made him a rising star 5 years earlier had failed to keep pace with competitors. 2 major clients had pulled their contracts within the same fiscal quarter. Investors who once fought for a seat at his table were now returning his calls late, if at all. His board had given him one final ultimatum: secure new capital within the next 2 quarters, or step down as CEO. The Korean investment opportunity had come through a broker Marcus barely knew, a deal structured through several intermediary firms with the actual investors' identities kept confidential until the final signing meeting. Marcus had questions at first, but desperation has a way of quieting caution. A billion-dollar partnership was on the table. He was not about to ask too many questions about the people writing the check. "Once this deal closes," Marcus told Vanessa the night before they flew to Seoul, pouring 2 glasses of champagne in their hotel suite, "we'll be worth more than we ever were before. This is bigger than the company. This is legacy money." Vanessa raised her glass, eyes gleaming with the particular hunger of someone who had climbed her way into a life she intended to keep. "To legacy," she said. Neither of them noticed the small detail buried in the deal memo, the detail that would have changed everything if either of them had bothered to read past the financial terms. The lead negotiating partner representing the investment group was listed only by a company name: Kang Group Holdings. It meant nothing to Marcus. He had never heard the name before. The morning of the meeting, everything felt like it was falling into place exactly the way Marcus had imagined it would. The car that picked them up from the airport was immaculate. The hotel suite was larger than his first apartment had been. Everyone he passed in the lobby seemed to move a little faster, speak a little more carefully, the way people do around men who are about to become very rich. And then he saw her. Nia standing near the private elevator bank in a cream dress, speaking quietly with 2 men in dark suits. For a moment, Marcus genuinely believed his mind was playing tricks on him. It had been almost 4 years. She looked different, more composed somehow, older in a way that suited her rather than aged her, but it was unmistakably her. "Wait," Vanessa said, following his gaze, a smile spreading across her face. "Is that your ex-wife?" Marcus didn't answer right away. "What's she doing here?" Vanessa continued, delighted at the discovery. "Serving coffee? Working the front desk?" She laughed at her own joke, loud enough to draw a glance from a nearby staff member. Marcus felt something shift inside him, something between confusion and irritation. Whatever had brought Nia to this hotel, on this day, at this exact hour, he decided it did not matter. This was his moment. Nothing was going to distract him from the deal. He walked toward her without fully deciding to, some old instinct pulling him forward, the same instinct that once made him seek her approval before every major decision in his life. Nia turned as he approached, and for one brief second, something flickered across her face. Not fear, not anger, something closer to mild surprise, quickly smoothed over into complete composure. "Marcus," she said evenly, just his name, nothing more. "Nia." He looked her over, taking in the expensive dress, the confidence in her posture, and something in him refused to accept that she had simply moved on and done well for herself. It was easier to assume this was a coincidence, that she worked here in some administrative capacity, anything other than acknowledging that she might have built a life that didn't need him in it at all. Vanessa stepped up beside him, coffee cup in hand, looking Nia over with the slow, deliberate contempt of a woman who had spent years being reminded, subtly and not so subtly, that she was the other woman, the one who came after, the one who would always be compared to what came before. So this is her, Vanessa said, tilting her head. I have to say, I expected someone a little more put together. Vanessa, Marcus said, though there was no real warning in his voice, more amusement than concern. I'm just saying, Vanessa continued, it must be hard seeing what you left behind and knowing you'll never have it. Nia's expression didn't change. I hope you both have a good meeting, she said calmly and turned to walk away. It was Vanessa who moved first, closing the small distance between them with 2 quick steps, tilting her coffee cup just enough that the scalding liquid spilled forward, splashing across Nia's collar and down the front of her dress. Nia gasped softly, more from the heat than the shock, stepping back instinctively. Oops, Vanessa said. My hand slipped. Marcus laughed. Nia said nothing. She reached for a napkin from her small clutch, pressing it against the wet fabric, her jaw tight but her composure otherwise unshaken. A hotel staff member rushed forward with a stack of towels, apologizing repeatedly, though it had not been her fault at all. Some people, Marcus said, glancing around at the small crowd that had gathered, unable to resist the audience, never move up in life. He gestured toward a nearby security guard, waving him over with the casual authority of a man used to being obeyed. Can someone please handle this? We have a meeting to get to. The security guard hesitated, glancing at Nia, then at the 2 men in dark suits standing a few feet away who had gone very quiet, watching the entire exchange with expressions that Marcus, in his arrogance, completely failed to notice. Nia looked at Marcus one final time. There was no anger in her eyes, which somehow made the moment feel heavier than if there had been. I hope your meeting goes well, she said quietly and walked toward the elevator without looking back. Not her problem anymore, Vanessa said, slipping her arm through Marcus's. Let's go make our $1 billion. They stepped into their own elevator, laughing, already imagining the celebration dinner that would follow the signing. Neither of them noticed the 2 men in dark suits stepping into a different elevator, speaking quietly into a phone, relaying every detail of what they had just witnessed to someone waiting several floors above. If Marcus had been paying closer attention, he might have noticed that one of the men said a name into the phone before the doors closed, a name that would have stopped him cold had he only recognized it. Chairman Kang's wife. The conference room on the top floor was designed to intimidate, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seoul skyline, a long glass table polished to a mirror shine, and a wall of screens displaying the financial terms of the deal Marcus had spent 11 months negotiating. His legal team and 2 board members were already seated when he and Vanessa arrived, along with a translator and 3 representatives from the investment group, whose faces Marcus did not recognize. Everything is in order, his lead attorney whispered as Marcus took his seat. Once the principal parties arrive, we finalize signatures within the hour. Marcus nodded, adjusting his cufflinks, feeling the particular satisfaction of a man who believes the hardest part is already behind him. He glanced at his watch. 2 minutes past the scheduled start time. Punctuality had never been his personal strength, but he expected it from others, especially from investors he was about to make very happy. The doors opened. 2 security personnel entered first, positioning themselves at either side of the entrance with the quiet efficiency of men who did this for a living. Not for show, but because it was simply how things were done. Then came 4 executives Marcus recognized from earlier correspondence, men whose names had appeared on emails, but whose faces he had never seen in person. They each nodded respectfully toward the doorway before taking their seats, a gesture that struck Marcus as slightly odd, almost reverent. Then Kang Min-jae walked into the room. He was not a large man, nor did he carry himself with any obvious display of power. He wore a simple dark suit, no visible watch, no ostentatious jewelry. But every single person already seated in that room, every executive, every attorney, every translator, rose immediately to their feet the moment he crossed the threshold. Marcus, caught off guard, stood a half-second late, glancing around, in confusion as he registered the sheer weight of respect radiating from every person in the room. Vanessa stood beside him, her earlier confidence faltering slightly as she took in the scene. And then Nia walked in behind him. She had changed out of the coffee-stained dress into a simple, elegant navy suit, her composure completely restored, her presence entirely different from the woman who had stood quietly in the lobby 20 minutes earlier, accepting an insult without complaint. She moved to stand beside Kang Min-jae, not behind him, not beside an assistant's chair, but directly at his side, in the position reserved for someone whose presence in that room was not incidental. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "No," he whispered, so quietly that only Vanessa heard him. "No, that's not possible." Kang Min-jae surveyed the room briefly before speaking, his voice calm, measured, carrying the particular authority of a man who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. "Good morning," he said. "I am Chairman Kang of Kang Group Holdings." He paused, glancing briefly at Nia beside him, something soft passing across his expression before it returned to its previous composure. "And this is my wife, Nia Kang." The silence that followed was absolute. Vanessa's champagne-colored coffee cup, which she had carried into the conference room out of pure habit, slipped slightly in her hand, nearly spilling before she caught it. Her face had gone pale, her earlier smugness replaced entirely by dawning horror. Marcus stared at Nia, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were plainly showing him. The woman he had mocked in the lobby less than half an hour ago, the woman he had told to move up in life, the woman his new wife had poured hot coffee onto without a shred of hesitation, was standing at the side of the single most powerful man in the room, the man whose signature was required to save Marcus's entire company from collapse. "Nia," Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. I had no idea." Kang Min-jae's expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "No idea of what, Mr. Bennett? That my wife deserves basic respect regardless of who she is married to? Or no idea that the woman you poured coffee on this morning happens to be the person who convinced me to consider your company in the first place?" The room seemed to hold its breath. "I don't understand," Marcus said weakly. "Let me explain," Kang Min-jae continued, his tone still measured, still calm, which somehow made every word land harder than if he had shouted. "When this investment opportunity was presented to our board 6 months ago, several of my advisors recommended against pursuing it. Your company's recent performance has been, to put it kindly, inconsistent." He let the words settle before continuing. "It was my wife who advocated on your behalf. She told me that people deserve second chances, that success or failure in business does not always reflect a person's full character. She spoke of you as someone who once had real potential, even after everything that happened between you." Marcus turned to look at Nia, stunned. "You did that? After everything, you still—" "I believed everyone deserves a chance to prove they've changed," Nia said quietly, her voice steady, betraying no emotion. "I was wrong." Kang Min-jae nodded slowly. "This morning, I asked 2 of my associates to observe your arrival, simply as a courtesy, to ensure everything proceeded smoothly before our meeting. What they witnessed instead was a public humiliation of my wife, orchestrated by you and your current wife, in front of hotel staff and business associates." He paused. "You called security to have her removed from a lobby she had every right to stand in. You told her, in front of witnesses, that she would never move up in life." Every word landed like a verdict. "I can explain," Marcus stammered, though he had no explanation that would matter now, and some part of him already understood that. "There is nothing to explain," Kang Min-jae said. "I saw the footage myself. Hotel security cameras are quite thorough." He gestured slightly, and one of his associates set a tablet on the table, the screen displaying a paused frame of the lobby scene from 20 minutes earlier. Vanessa's coffee cup mid-tilt, Nia's face calm even as the liquid struck her dress. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed without producing any sound. "Is this how you treat people?" Kang Min-jae asked, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge now. "When you believe they have no power to affect your life? Because that tells me everything I need to know about how you would treat my company, my employees, my investment, the moment you believed you had the upper hand." Marcus's legal team shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One board member had gone visibly pale, already calculating the disaster this would become once it reached the press. "Chairman Kang," Marcus said, his voice shaking now, all pretense of confidence gone. "Please, this deal means everything to my company. Thousands of jobs depend on this. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but surely we can still—" "The investment is canceled," Kang Min-jae said simply, cutting him off without raising his voice. "Effective immediately, the capital previously allocated to your company will instead be redirected to a competing firm that approached us last month with, notably, better financials and considerably better manners." He turned to his associates. "Please have the documents prepared reflecting the withdrawal. We're finished here." If you're finding this story satisfying so far, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment telling us what you think Marcus deserves next, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that karma always finds its way back around. Now back to the story. News of the collapsed deal spread faster than Marcus could have imagined possible. By the time his plane landed back in the United States, 3 separate financial news outlets had already published articles questioning the sudden withdrawal of Kang Group Holdings from what had been quietly rumored as the biggest overseas investment of the fiscal year. Marcus's board convened an emergency call before he had even cleared customs. "What exactly happened in that room?" his board chairman demanded over the phone, his voice tight with barely restrained fury. "We had reports that the deal was finalized. Now I'm hearing it collapsed in under 10 minutes. Marcus had no honest answer that wouldn't destroy what little credibility he had left. He mumbled something about a personal misunderstanding, about miscommunication between parties. But the board chairman was not a fool, and rumors traveled fast in circles that mattered. Within a week, 3 major clients quietly informed Marcus's company that they would not be renewing their contracts at the end of the quarter. Within 2 weeks, his largest remaining investor sold off a significant portion of shares, triggering a chain reaction that sent the stock price tumbling nearly 40%. Within a month, the board called for an emergency vote. Marcus was removed as CEO of the company he had built from nothing, the company he had once told Nia would make them both untouchable. Vanessa left him 3 weeks after that, taking with her the jewelry, the car registered in her name, and whatever remained of the marriage that had been built on ambition rather than affection. She did not leave a note. She simply packed her belongings while Marcus was at a meeting with bankruptcy attorneys and was gone by the time he returned home. He sat alone that night in the house that would soon be sold to cover outstanding debts, staring at a phone that no longer rang with calls from board members or investors or anyone at all. And for the first time in years, Marcus Bennett understood exactly what it felt like to lose everything he thought defined him. Weeks later, Marcus requested a meeting with Nia. He did not expect her to agree, and for several days, he heard nothing back. When she finally responded, it was a brief message suggesting a quiet cafe near the Han River, away from cameras, away from anyone who might recognize either of them. He arrived early, sitting at a corner table, watching the door with an anxiety he hadn't felt since the earliest, most uncertain days of building his first company. When Nia walked in, She looked exactly as composed as she had in that conference room, dressed simply, no entourage, no security visible, though Marcus assumed it was there somewhere, discreetly. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat down. "I almost didn't," Nia replied honestly. Marcus folded his hands on the table, searching for words that had never come easily to him. Not real ones, not the kind that admitted fault without also asking for something in return. "I owe you an apology," he finally said, a real one, not the kind I gave in that conference room trying to save the deal. "I mean it, Nia. I'm sorry for how I treated you back then, and I'm sorry for what happened at the hotel." Nia studied him for a long moment before responding. "Do you know why I initially told Min-jae to consider your company, even after everything you put me through?" Marcus shook his head. "Because I genuinely believed people could change," she said. "I believed that maybe success had made you cruel, but that somewhere underneath it, the person I originally fell in love with still existed. I wanted to believe that because it would have meant the years I spent supporting you weren't wasted on someone who was always going to become that person eventually." "And now?" Marcus asked quietly. "Now I know the truth," Nia said, her voice steady, without cruelty, simply factual. "You didn't lose everything because I married a powerful man, Marcus. You didn't lose your company because of bad luck, or a misunderstanding, or unfortunate timing." She paused, letting the silence settle before continuing. "You lost everything because you only ever respected people when you believed they had power over you. The moment you thought someone was beneath you, you showed them exactly who you really were. And eventually, that always catches up to a person." Marcus had no response. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound hollow after everything that had happened. Nia stood, smoothing her coat, glancing at him one final time with an expression that held no anger, no satisfaction, only a quiet, settled peace. "I hope you figure out who you want to be, Marcus. I really do, but I won't be the one who helps you find out anymore." She walked out of the cafe without looking back, disappearing into the crowded street outside, leaving Marcus alone at the table with a cold cup of coffee and the full weight of everything he had thrown away. Sometimes karma doesn't arrive with anger, or shouting, or dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wrapped in the truth a person has been avoiding for years, delivered by the very person they once believed would never amount to anything without them. And sometimes, the truth is, the only justice anyone ever needed